We're still missing a couple of people, Harlow and Bethany, it looks like. I was just looking at the syllabus. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. So today's Genesis B, about 103 lines. Next week, I've got Dream of the Rood down, then on Election Day, the Seafarer, then Battle of Malden. I'm just thinking, definitely need to rearrange, and I talked about this last week, Battle of Malden. I'm just trying to think of how or where. We're not going to have class on December 8th, so you can totally cross that day off. Malden is really long. It's 325 lines. So we usually don't get through all of it in terms of translating it in class, in the 3-hour class period. The students translate all of it. Just trying to decide if we ought to just move it to the end and do Wolf and Edwalker and the Wife's Lament the week before Thanksgiving. Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. So, for just thinking ahead, for November 10th, put the Wanderer instead of Battle of Malden. And then for November 17th, Wolf and Edwalker and Wife's Lament. And then for the 24th, our last day of class, Battle of Malden. Usually, the only reason I put Wolf and Edwalker and the Wife's Lament at the end, they're not necessarily difficult to translate. They're difficult to understand because nobody knows what they are about, ultimately. Battle of Malden is very clear. I mean, it's kind of like Battle of Brunanburg, only it gives you some really, really great Anglo-Saxon heroic ethos speeches towards the end. So, and this will be good because Dream of the Rood, Seafarer, and Wanderer all ought to be kind of right close together. So we'll do Dream of the Rood, Seafarer, Wanderer, Wolf and Edwalker. Oh, wait, somebody's calling me. And then Battle of Malden, the last day of class. We're not going to do presentations. I don't think we're going to have time for presentations. Your seminar paper is still due that last day of class. And I'll let you know then whether or not we'll have some kind of final. Odds are 99 to 1 we won't. For the simple reason I will be reading and marking up your seminar papers probably until the night before grades are due, along with my other classes. Okay. Yes. Hold on. I gotta turn the volume up. Go ahead.
So I'm kind of confused about what this is. At one point, to write about an aspect of Anglo-Saxon culture that wasn't necessarily tied to a text, and another it needed to be tied to a text. So.
Okay, let me begin by asking, how do you define an aspect of Anglo-Saxon culture? Oh, okay. How do you define an aspect of Anglo-Saxon culture?
I was going to write about the cult of the Virgin Mary and how it was a big deal in
Okay. how are you going to achieve that? I mean, well, okay. It would seem to me if you're going to write about the cult of Virgin Mary in Anglo-Saxon England, one of the things at least you're going to have for one of your primary sources of evidence would be something written about the Virgin Mary during the Anglo-Saxon period. So, you know, A Life of the Virgin Mary, homilies by Alfric or others on the Virgin Mary. So even though you're discussing that aspect of the culture, your evidence is probably going to be largely, at least, literary. Okay. If you were going to do something like, and nobody else has addressed this topic with me, I think, other than in one of the chats. If somebody, for example, was going to write about the Sutton Hoo discovery, which is this Anglo-Saxon ship burial that was discovered in 1938-39. If somebody was going to do that, was going to write about the historical aspect of it, I would probably kind of gently shepherd them to emphasize what was one of the things used in the coroner's inquest about the Sutton Hoo ship burial, which was they had to determine whether or not what was buried was considered grave goods or treasure. England has this weird law. If you put it in the ground as part of a grave, okay, then it belongs to the person upon whose property it is discovered. If it was put into the ground so that it could be dug up again later, then it's considered treasure, in which case it belongs to the crown, the country, okay? Well, the Anglo-Saxon, the Sutton Hoo ship burial was determined to be grave goods. So it was ruled, coroner's inquest, they had to have a coroner rule on this, and they do every time a burial kind of thing is found. Coroner's inquest had to determine, okay, treasure or ship burial. They determined it was a burial, so it belonged to the lady upon whose property it was all discovered. And she immediately turned it over to the crown because it's one of the greatest things. So if a student were to focus on that, I would say, okay, draw your attention to the description of the grave goods and link them to a literary artifact. The literary artifact that they were linked to in the coroner's inquest in 1939 was Beowulf. Because when they started pulling stuff out of the ground, it was almost like reading a list of items straight out of Scyld Scheving's burial that is given at the beginning of Beowulf. You have a standard, you have a sword, you have a shield, you've got a purse, you've got all this kind of stuff. And it's just, and that was one of the pieces of evidence that they used to say it's a burial, okay? Your papers need to be primarily literary in origin. Let me put it that way. So if you're writing about the cult of the Virgin Mary, rely on literary sources. And literary here definitely includes homilies, saints' lives, things like that. Other questions about the paper?
Yeah, so I'm wondering to like what extent would you want, like, I was wondering because you mentioned the role of translation with, like, having translation with it.
Right.
To what extent do you want our own translations to be part of the final paper?
Whenever you quote from Old English, provide your translation.
Gotcha.
Okay? Just, have the Old English, and then beneath that, I would say at the beginning of your translation with a left bracket, the end of your translation with a right bracket. And break it up line-wise the way it is, in your text. But definitely include your translation. And after the first quotation and translation, include either a foot or endnote, doesn't matter to me, I don't care which one, that says, essentially, all quotations come from and give the source. So if you're pulling materials from Marsden, list Marsden, and say all translations are the authors, or are my own, if you want. What that does is, you know, obviously it establishes some credibility on your part for me, okay? Rather than, here's a source, and I'm going to quote from Roy Lewis's translation, because that doesn't instill confidence in me that you're really understanding that material. By providing your own translation, that's telling me, I understand this. I get what this author is saying, or what this text is saying, okay? Other questions?
I wanted to ask a quick question. So I think I'm gonna like translate and say Eugenia, but from Elfridge, but I'm having a hard time finding like secondary sources, and I didn't know if you like knew anything else because I looked all over JSTOR.
Is that text not in? Isn't that text in Marsden?
Yeah, it is.
Does Marsden not give a list of texts at the beginning?
I don't know. I'll do it again.
Because he usually does. I'm just trying to. St. Eugenia is page 217. Homily for Easter Sunday from Alfred. He gives about 7 or 8, top of page 219. Now, some of these are just, you know, Alfred's first homilies, et cetera, et cetera. One on Alfred, vernacular prose tradition, anti-Judaism. Yeah, there's not a lot there that is specific to this source. Off the top of my head, no. I can't think of anything. One thing I would suggest doing, because she is much, much more familiar with Alfred, email Dr. McDaniel. Okay. Yeah, I mean, definitely. You know, she's a better source definitely on Alfred than I would be. So email her again if you haven't heard back, is what I would say.
We already kind of talked about it. I just didn't know if you knew anything either.
Not off the top of my head, I don't.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay, let's jump into Genesis B. I don't think we'll be here very long. I mean, we definitely won't take 3 hours to go over this, I don't believe, because it's pretty straightforward. So we've got 103 lines, and there are 2, 4, 6 of you. That comes out to. Why don't we start with about each one doing 15 or 16 lines apiece? And tell you what, I'll read it in Old English, so you can at least be getting the sounds. And then you give me your polished translations, okay? Assuming you have. If you don't have a polished one, just word for word is fine. Eyes are really acting up. Trying to get the right distance. So this is on page 168. Så sprak sig övermodekynning för was ängla kinost. Vitus on hevna on is herrenlav. Dycht nidira oth hier todola wordon. Thought him for galshippe god silverware. Nicht on modi ire. Where hina antat morder inon, neither antat neobed, on chiop him namen sidan. What's the hesta, hatten shalada, satten sidan, yet hina thera swerten hella, grundus yimon, nalis with gold winon. I'll stop there, that's 9 lines. So who wants to start? And I'm going to stop you almost immediately. Harlow, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. With the, sorry, this is breaking up a little bit on my end.
Yeah, I think I am too. So.
Okay. Did you want it like read in Old English or just like the polished translation?
If you want to read it in Old English, go ahead. If you want to just do the translation, that's fine too.
I'll just do the translation.
That's fine. We're going to work on pronunciation of Old English and Beowulf, so since this semester's kind of gone off track. Okay.
So the polished translation, and also I unfortunately don't have line numbers.
Okay.
So just let me know when to stop. Then spoke the proud king who had before been the brightest angel, the most radiant in heaven, years to his lord, precious until he turned to folly, so because of his washness, God himself became greatly angry in heart. Then threw him into the torment down in that corpse bed and created him a name and said, the highest one must be called Satan. He then commanded Satan to control the black hell abyss and not to contend with God. Satan, sorrowing, spoke out and said, he who henceforth possess hell shall control the abyss. Before he had been God's angel radiant in heaven until he was seduced by his own ambition and his presumption most of all, that he would not desire to respect the word of the host of the Lord.
Okay, you stop there. Stop there. Okay, so let's back up, and I'm going to ask this question that anybody can answer. It doesn't have to be just Harlow. The fourth word, okay, se spreekt over mode kini. Now, your gloss says proud, and I keep forgetting. I still don't have it in here. Hold on just 1 second. So I'm going to pause the recording. Okay, so the fourth word, overmode. If you look to the glossary in Marsden, Marsden gives as glosses for overmode, proud, overbearing. He also gives overexuberance, excess of courage. Okay, who's it describing first of all in this opening line?
It's describing Satan.
It's describing Satan. Okay, in J.R. Clark Hall's Concise Anglo-Saxon Dictionary, I had it. Clark Hall gives for overmode, pride, insolence, proud, overbearing, and then adjectives, proud, overbearing, insolent. Okay, a couple other definitions of derivative words from overmode. Overmodiness, pride, haughtiness, arrogance. Overmodlich, proud, haughty, insolent. Okay? So the general idea is what? Is common, ordinary pride, what he means? Whoever the author is. No. This word is used throughout Anglo-Saxon literature, overmode. It's used for only two characters. Okay? This is one of the places it shows up. It shows up in, I'm pretty sure, in the Old English Daniel. It shows up in Battle of Malden. We'll see. And except for one other person, it is always only used for Satan. Okay? So if you have a word that is always only used for Satan, what does that tell you about that descriptive term? It's never used positively. It's always pejorative. Okay? The other person that it's used for is Beertnoth, who is the leader of the English troops in the Battle of Malden, an actual historical, real, living, breathing character. He's not a fiction. He was real. Okay, and whoever wrote the Battle of Malden attributed overmode to Birtnoth's actions. That is, he acted out of overmode. This is why, a little single word can just be fraught with an awful lot of meaning, right? So spoke the, is it merely proud? What's the difference between pride and arrogance? Isn't arrogance a step higher? Haughtiness, a little bit higher than proudness. This is, kind of the ancient Greek hubris idea, where you step on the toes of the gods. And in Greek tragedy, you step on the toes of the gods, and what's going to happen? Well, what happens to Satan in the poem? He gets thrown out of heaven, right? So notice he was the ENGL. What's the case of ENGL? Genitive plural. He was the Sheenast. Anybody in here Firefly fans? Old Fox series with one of the terms that's used on Firefly a lot by the character who played Jane, shiny, meaning pretty cool. Well, this is shiniest. He's the shiniest of angels. Okay, your gloss tells you brightest. It's not necessarily brightest. Brightest is literally brightest, and we're going to see that in the Dream of the Rood. Shiny implies what? If something shines, where does it get its light from?
Somewhere else.
Somewhere else. Something else is shining on it. Okay? He was the shiniest of angels. Why? Because the sweetest on heaven, okay, most radiant in heaven, and dearest to his Lord, because he was the closest of the created beings to God, okay? And because he was closest to God, that means, he radiated, reflected more of God's light, so to speak, okay? Until he pissed off God, until God himself, Werth, became Michti on Mode Ira. Michti, mightily, on Mode, that's the second half of the overmode, okay? Over, super, above, in mind, okay? He became what? Mightily angry in mind, okay? And so he threw him out. Translation was very good. Let's see, is there anything else there? We get line 10. We get the verb mathaloda. Okay? There are various words that you can use to describe speech. Sprack, quaff, mathaloda, sida, said, etc. Often they are determined by, in poetry at least, they're determined by, the alliteration, what the poet needs to, alliterate with another sound, okay? And here, it's not the alliterating sound, the mathaloda isn't. So he doesn't use sprack initially, okay? Even though, notice what the alliterating sound is in that line. Satan, Satan, mathaloda, Sorienda, sprack. Now, sprack is the final accentuated syllable. And even though it begins with SP, it doesn't literally alliterate with the S in Sor or the S in Satan because of the rules of alliteration, right? But mathaloda means more than he just said. Mathaloda is kind of like he walked up to the podium, cleared his throat, tapped on the mic, and now he's going to give some kind of declamation, some kind of speech, right? So, Satan made a speech, and you've got a gloss down there. The formula much used in heroic poetry, Satan does not in fact begin to speak until line 19. That is something else. That is a technique that we will see throughout Old English poetry, and we're going to see it famously in Beowulf. The character Hrothgar is going to be handed a sword hilt. And it's going to say, Hrothgar, it's either Sprack or Madeline. Hrothgar spoke. And then for about 17 lines, he doesn't speak. He looks at the sword hilt that's in his hand. And he thinks about what the sword hilt means. Then he speaks. Okay? So Satan speaking sorrowfully, etc. And he talks about what they're doing there. Okay. Let's pick up with line 16b. I'll read some in Old English, and then I'll ask somebody to translate. And my eyes are really bad today. Wail him oninon, he in his herton, hot was him uton, ravlich wike, he thawarda kwath. Is this angestude, unjelich swede, tham odrum, thewe kudon, heon on helven riche, the me minre hear on log, thewe hina fortham alwalden, agenemoston, Romegan uris riches, naft he thea richjadon, thought he us haft befallen, fira to bot me, helathera hatten, heaven riche benumen. Okay, so I did about the first 10 lines. So somebody translate from 16b to, let's see, where's a good place, to the end of 31a. Herm Anthisahela. All right, Chelsea?
Ambition was within him about his heart, outside of him a hot, cruel punishment. He then spoke this utterance. Is this constricted place very unlike the other, which we knew before high in heavenly kingdom, which my Lord grants me? Though we could not possess it because of the Almighty, extend our kingdom. He has not been true, however, that he has struck us down to the bonfire of fire in the heavenly kingdom. How they designated the humankind themselves, that I am of most sorrows that Adam is too, who was made of earth, occupy my mighty throne. He is to be in bliss, and we are to suffer this punishment, this affliction in hell.
Okay, good. So notice, what is Satan telling us? What really bothers him? Is it being kicked out of heaven? Adam's going to be happy. What else? Why is Adam going to be happy? He's going to, because, keep going. He's going to have his place, he says. Adam shall, they was of earth made. He who was made of, that is dirt. What's Satan, so to speak, made of? There's no corporeal essence, right? Pure intellect. So, you know, in terms of createdness, compared to Adam, Satan is what? It's like as far higher as you can be. And he's going, this piece of dirt is going to mina strongly can stol behalden. He will hold my mighty throne. That's why he's angry. Okay? Now, just in the few lines we've read, 31, right? What's your impression of Satan? How does he come across? Does this sound like somebody who's, you know, bemoaning his fate? Lainey, are you going to say something?
I mean, I was going to say he sounds bitter.
Okay. Well, you're understandable. What else, though?
He sounds like almost like a jealous child.
Okay.
Like, he's showing favoritism to this kid and not me.
Okay.
That's what it sounds like to me. Just reminds me of Milton Satan.
Why?
Because it's very similar. Just this anger and jealousy.
Defiance, right?
Yeah, defiance, yeah. Exactly.
I mean, he's not cowed. I mean, he's been thrown out of heaven down to, what's the place that he's now in called? Line 5. Where Pina Anthat Morther Innan. He threw him in that torment inside. Well, the word morther, it's the word from which we get murder. Okay? So he threw him into murder, so to speak, into this murderous place. I mean, the literal hellhole. Okay? And he's not, abject. He's not sorrowful or anything like that. He's, thumbing his nose at God, so to speak. Okay, 31b. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have read Paradise Lost? Sarah, Bethany, Cheryl, Lainey, her. Okay, most of you. So I'll read another about 10 lines, and then somebody can translate. I gotta find it first. There it is. Now this is a little different from what I was just talking about, however. Voila, ach ich minra handa jawald, und moste anitid utgewerden, wezen ana winterstunde, zone ich mit this werada, ach ligeth me imbe irenbende, readeth rakenten sal, ich reaches leas, habeth me swaherde, helle klomas, faste befonden. Is fear Mitchell, Uvan on Neothona. Ich ne Yesea, Lathrin Landshipe. Lee, L-I-G is Lee. So you don't say the G, it's palatalized the Y kind of sound. It's hard to say. Lia ne Aswamath, hot overhella, may habeth, Pringa Yespong, Sleeve Herdasal, see this a myriad, trying to find a period. A period may mean feda, fate sin yabundina, honda yahafta. Okay, so somebody pick up with 31b and go to the end of 45a. Leotha Bindum. Okay, Elizabeth? Elizabeth, go ahead.
All right. Alas, had I control of my hands and could not fight one time, be it one winter's hour, the hour is true. Be a lighter one, a loop of chain swings me. I am without the stone. I have such hard fetters of hell tightly clasped about me. Here is a great fire above and below. I never saw a more hateful region. The fire does not cease. It is hot throughout hell. A savagely cruel halter with fastenings of rings has hindered my movement. My power of walking is removed me. My feet are fettered, my hands shackled.
Okay, keep going, sorry.
The ways of these doors of hell are obstructed, so I may not at all escape from these limb bonds.
Okay. So,
is that where I'm supposed to stop?
Yeah, that was where he's supposed to stop. Compare that with his earlier, what he said earlier. Does the attitude seem any different? This is less defiant. I mean, what is everything in those 15, 16 lines saying? I'm constricted. I am bound. I have no freedom. I am not where I want to be. Hell is above me. Fire is above me. Fire is below me. That's telling us what? And fire's in the middle too. Okay. He's saying wherever I look, there's fire. And notice what he describes it as, line 39, 38b, 39. Ich ne Yesea ladren landshipa. I never saw what? A more hateful. Now your gloss tells you region. I don't know why he translates that region. Land, Shippa. Landship. We don't talk about landships. What do we talk about? Landscapes. He's talking about looking out and seeing a quote-unquote view. But what's the view? Hell, just as far as the eye can see. Okay? Let's see here. Anything else? No, I don't think there's anything else to point out. So, 46b. Somebody go from 46b. I'm going to read it first. From 46b to, man, it's ending up almost perfectly. You'll finish at the end of 60a. Hlutrum saulum. Saulum. Okay? First, let me read some in Old English. Lost my spot. There it is. 46b. Lijoth me imbe herdes irenes hata yaslayana grinlas greata. Midthi me gold haveth, yahefte betham halza. So ich wat he mina hi akude. On that wiste ek werelde drichten. That shelde unk adama, evele je wordan. Im that heaven reache. That ich achte minra hande je weld. Ac tholieth way through, way nu threa anhela. That sindam distro anhato. Grimma grunleza. So that's a little bit. Haveth us gold silver. Have ut god silver, verswappen anta swerte mistas, swa he us neme anie sinne je stellen, that we him antam lande love je fremadon. Where's it in? There it is. He have us there thus lechtes beschirde, beworpen an alra wite master. Okay, so pick up with somebody, 46b. Volunteer. Nobody?
This isn't my best, but I'll do it.
Go for it.
And I just have the word for word.
That's fine.
For this part of the text.
That's fine.
Okay. Hard irons hotly struck, bolts huge, because my God have shackled about the neck, so I know he mined army he knew, and that knew also, oh sorry, I said army too soon. I have it off to the side.
That's fine.
Also, army of the Lord must for us to Adam evilly turn out. Concerning that heavenly kingdom, that I concerning my hand control. Nevertheless, suffer we new punishments in hell, that sent darkness and heat, fierce and boundless, have us God himself swept away on this dark cloud. Though he to us no can any sin impute, that we him in heaven harm did, he has us yet the light deprived, cast us into the greatest of all torments. Not able we for that vengeance perpetrate, repay him with some harm, because he has cut us off from the light.
Oh, you just got muted. Laney, you're muted. Pick back up. Pick back up within. Yeah.
On top of it.
Yeah. Pick back. Start again with the. Hey, haveth.
Which
one? 56. Looks like 58.
Okay. Sorry about that. I have all these books.
Yeah, I understand. I do it all the time.
He hath now upon the world, there he have man made after his image. Through him he will again settle heavenly kingdom with pure souls.
Okay, so let's back up. I mean, that was all pretty good. Let's see, there were a couple of things. Actually, let me start from the end there. Notice line 58, there he hath man. It's not there he has, it's where he, okay, has man your work not made after his own likeness, after his likeness. Now your gloss tells you image. If you look at the Genesis story, it's according to the image and likeness of God, okay? And he's put them there, you know, he says, pure souls, etc. on earth, okay? Let's keep going backwards. So now what is he saying? Let's take that back. Let's go back to 50. What was it? He talks about what God is. He continues going on with around 47b. You know, put his neck in fetters and such. Talks about Adam. How God has, you know, bound Satan's hands again. And then he says, 51, 52. Octholiath way nu threa unhella. But now we suffer in hell. Right? Now we suffer in hell. That's in thistro and hatto, darkness and heat, boundless, you know, fierce boundless. God has us for swapping, your gloss tells you swept away in these dark mists. Okay? Why? Why has God swept them into those dark mists? What does he say in the next line and a half or so? So he to us not may what? Any sin impute. Now the so, the swa, what's he really mean? Is it so or thus? It's because. Here's where we see Satan earning the title that Jesus gives him, you know, in the Gospels, the father of lies. Because what's he saying? God may not impute any sin to us. We're innocent, is what he's saying. He threw us down here without cause. Okay, so what's he doing? He's imputing, you know, the unright deeds to God, so to speak. That we, in that, you know, land, Ephraimedon performed or did harm. He can't blame us for anything we did in heaven, he's saying, so to speak. He have us theathas lertus, and therefore he's deprived us of our light, and he has bewarpen, cast us in, you know, this place. Nor may we, because of that, raka, vengeance, perform. Why not? Because they're in hell? Yeah, that's one reason. I mean, that's the biggest obvious reason. How else, think about it. How else is Satan going to exact, I mean, think of this either philosophically or theologically, if you want. How is Satan going to exact vengeance against God? If God is God,
A corrupting man.
Bingo. He can't strike back at the big guy, right? I mean, you know, I've just finished with my European Lit to 1400, The Consolation of Philosophy of Boethius. And one of the things Lady Philosophy says in Boethius is, you know, pretty much everybody universally agrees that if there is a God, if God is real, you know, two qualities at least go with him: omniscience and omnipotence, all powerful. Okay, so if you're all powerful, then nothing else can harm you. So how do you get vengeance against that? Kick his pet. You know, kick his cat. Do something to his dog. Okay, that's That's humanity, right? So that's why he says, but. And if you're familiar with Satan's Paradise Lost, again, the echoes just ought to be ringing because Satan does the exact same thing. He's like, oh, I'm really angry at you. Oh, look, man, Adam. And he's going to replace us. Not on my watch, okay? Okay, let's pick up with 60B. I think that's where we left off. And somebody go to... no, it doesn't divide as well. The end of, it looks like 70... The line numbers are all messed up on this. There's a lot of hypermetric lines. Cheryl, are you going to go? Okay. Go to the end of what's on page 171. I think it's line 71, but I'm not positive. So
we have to think. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Let me read a bit in Old English first, and then we'll translate. Weitha shulen hiljan yerna, thought way on Adama, yifwe avramayan, and on his avrim swasome, anden yebetum. On winden him thar willen sinus, yifwe hit mayan wichte a think. May you leave it each may, nu thas leachtus furthor, thus they hey him thinketh longer neoton. Let me pause there for a minute. That is a really long line for Old English poetry. I mean, it's extremely long. Thus Eadus mid his Anglo-Saxon nemagan way thought on aldra yuinan, thought way michtiges Doris mode on wacken. Yeah, I'm wacken. Utan old windan hit numona bernum, thought heaven reacher. Nu we hit haben nemoton, you don't thought here his hildo for Latin. Thought here that unwinden, thought he mid his word the bad. Thuna worth they him wrath on moda. Awet, here from his hildo, thuna schulen here thus helle second. Und thus grimmen grundas, thuna moten way here us to youngrum haben, fear bern on thisum fastum chrome. Okay. Translate beginning with Weithashua.
We have to think about this earnestly, that we and Adam, if we ever are able to, and in the same way with his descendants, make good on our grudge, frustrate his will in this, if we are able to contrive it. I do not hope for this light for myself anymore, which he for himself thought he enjoyed for a long time, this blessedness with his angel strength. We are not able to ever bring about that we might weaken God's will. Let us now take it away from the children of men, that heavenly kingdom. Now we are not able to have it, and let us act so that they lose his favor, so that they disregard that which he ordered with his word. Then he will become angry against them in heart. He will reject them from his favor. Then have him visit this hell in these fierce depths, and then we are able to have them as subordinates to us, the children of men, in this constant grip. Let us now begin to think about the campaign.
Okay, that was fantastic. I don't know what that was. That was a very good translation. In fact, I don't think I have anything to add or point out. No, I don't. So, line 72, I think it is. So if somebody can go from 72 to, let's go to 84, the end of 84A. No, take that back. Yeah, 84A. So let me read some. Yif ich anegum thena, Theoden Madmas, Yara for Yava, Thunden way on than golden reach, Yesaliyeth Saturn, on Havdon Ura Setla Yewald, Thona Heme na on Lealvrentid, Leanu Nemechta, Mina Yiva Gildan, Yif his Yen Wolda, Min Rathenach Rich, Yathava Wurdan, Thate Upyanan, Utanichte, Kuman thur Thas Klustro and have the Kraft mid him, Thate mid Featherhoman Flagen Machta, Winden an Woltna, there you worked standeth Adam and Ewa, if you want, on Earth Riche, mid Wayland bewunden, and we sent a warpene heater on Thas Diapen Dallo. Volunteers? Who hasn't gone yet? Elizabeth's gone. Bethany hasn't gone. Bethany? You're muted. Thank
Sorry. If I to any follower princely of the good kingdom happy dwelt and had our thrones controlled, then he me never any better, and I wasn't sure about that next word, with returns, nor could my gift repay. If any of my things would turn out to be consenting to it, that he up from here out might go through fingers and constrain him, that he with feather dressed or with wings fly might circle in sky, to where created stand Adam and Eve in the earth with prosperity surrounded. And we, I take it the next word, we cast down hither on this sea, deathly valley.
In this deep valley. It's kind of interesting because in my European lit course, we're getting ready to start in about a week and a half, Dante, and how does Dante begin? If you're familiar with the Divine Comedy, how does Dante begin? He's in a dark valley, okay? And he's going to go into an even deeper, darker valley of hell, okay? So, how does Satan here address the other fallen angels?
He's like reminding them of a debt. He's calling them to action.
Okay.
It's like honorable reward.
Okay.
Yeah, they're like his things.
He uses the exact term. So if they're his things, then he's
like the Lord.
He's their Lord. Okay.
It's the Lord thing relationship.
It's
totally
the Lord
screwed up.
Well, yes, but notice that, you get that kind of pagan Germanic social custom being thoroughly adopted into this. This is a religious text. It's meant to be a religious text. It is probably written, according to Horace's old dictum about why literature is written, to teach and delight. It is delightful because you can't help but translate this, and look at Satan and go, man, that guy's good. What a talker he is, right? Okay, and God kind of comes across harshly. Bear in mind, within this bit of the poem, we get one perspective. Well, if you read Paradise Lost, let me rephrase it. If you read selections of Paradise Lost, Satan looks great. William Blake famously said Milton was of the party of Satan because he thought Milton didn't intend it, but he just created a great Satan because Milton was internally, according to Blake, a rebel. And Milton, if you know much about Milton, Milton did have his pretty strong rebellious instincts. He wrote for the doctrine and discipline of divorce. Arguing for the basis of that, okay? So, notice what he says. We can, maybe we can break out of here, fly to where they are, with feathers like birds and such, okay, and get there and tempt them. And do what? And bring them down to this deep valley. So why does he want to bring Adam and Eve and their descendants to hell? Is it so they can be servants? Yeah, to some extent. But what else? Solely to thwart God's will. Okay. 84b. Nu hier drichtnescent. Worthran Michle. Unmoten him thona welan agan. The welan helven reach a haben chelven. Reach a min richte. This se rad yeshir monakine. Thought me is on minum moda swasar. On minum hiya praeleth. Thought here heaven reach a agan to agra. If hit your animaya, you winden midwichte, thought he award wordus, Lara, for Latin. So me hear him the Lathrin, Beth. If here breaketh his yabod shipper, thone he him a bolgan wortheth. Sidden bith him, se wela onwinded, on worth him wheater yagarwod, sum hard harm sharu. So somebody pick up with 84b and go to the end of 95a. Who hasn't gone yet? Sarah, you haven't gone yet, have you? You're muted.
Yeah,
Okay.
I haven't gone yet.
Okay.
This is the rough version, and I'm sorry, and now I don't know where I'm at.
84b, nu hier drichter sind.
Okay, so here, I have, now they are more valued, this is cool, by much, and made for themselves the prosperity possess, then we in the heavenly kingdom should have our kingdom by right. This is the benefit allotted to mankind that I, in my mind, that is so painful to me. It grieves me that they will have eternity. If any of you may bring about with any way that something like that they word God his teaching abandoned at once, they will be the more loathsome to him. If they reach his authority, then he would become enraged with them. Keep going, or am I totally off?
Keep going to the end of 95.
Okay.
Sum hard Hermsharu.
Right, okay. So here, after that, the abundance that they would be overturned, and some fate would be prepared for them, some hard punishment.
Okay. Notice his assumption, because he's operating entirely on an assumption. What's his assumption?
God will be angry with them if they disregard his word.
Okay. Keep going. I mean, that's part of his assumption. And what else? God's going to treat Adam and Eve and their descendants how?
The same way he treated Satan.
Bingo. Exact same way he treated Satan and the fallen angels. What's the difference, however, between Satan and the fallen angels and humanity here? Are Satan and the fallen angels?
Satan should know better.
Okay, keep going.
Well, humanity gets Jesus, but angels don't, because like Chelsea said, they should know better and they get it willfully.
Are angels made, how did he put it? Line 58, after his own likeness. Are angels made in the image of God? Not according to Christian.
No.
Yes, I know my thing's telling me my connection is unstable. It's not unstable. No, they're not. Okay. Last bit. Told you we wouldn't be here very long. 95b. Hidden his eala, who ye he besweechen, sithen ich may set. Sithen ich may seftemai, resten on thisum raktentum, if him that reach a loseth. Sethe that yelasteth, him bith leon yarrow, after to aldra, thus way herina magnum, untisum fearforth, framina yuina. Sitten late each hine with me, silvna swa hwa swa, that sejan kimeth, thus hotten hella, that here Elvan kinningus unwordliche, wardum undadum lara. Anybody want to do those last about 10 lines? Hidgeth his. Okay? He's saying, give thought, all of you. What? How ye he besweetchen. How you may what? Be yeah, exactly. Sivan ich may seftamai. Sivan, because or since I may sefta more easily, because I may more easily rest on thisum, what's racontum? Chains, fetters, shackles. Okay. I can more easily rest in these chains, in these shackles, if him, plural, to them, what?
The kingdom is lost.
The kingdom is lost. I can bear my punishment, my suffering, more easily if they lose, not earth, if they lose God's kingdom. Okay? Saith that elasteth. He who achieves that, that's what the saith means. He who, often when you see saith, you almost immediately go, is that in opening one of those kind of relative clauses? He who does such and such, he who that achieves, him bith lam yarrow, him, to him, okay, is, that's bith, a reward prepared after to aldra. What's after to aldra? Yeah, forever and ever. Who's the reward coming from? Satan? Yeah. What's the reward going to be? You're going to get a less hot place to be chained up or something? Right? Thus way that we herein may in this fire forth go framene you winning. Framene, we're told by way of benefits, you winning, to win, to achieve. That we may in this fire, okay, thus receive benefits. And then you get the sit and lat ich hina, and you've got a gloss there. I shall allow him to sit. What's the I shall imply? What is Satan telling us?
Yes, I'm sure.
Bingo.
Yeah, that Satan's letting someone sit beside him, like, so they're equal in power.
Equal? This is Satan.
Well, maybe not
This is
equal.
Satan we're talking about. Yeah, not equal, but you could be my right-hand man, so to speak. Okay?
Yeah.
But he's declaring his authority in this spot. Right? I will let him sit next to me, with me, against me. Silvna, and you got another long gloss. Swa hwa, I can't say that for some reason. Swa hwa swa that. Okay. Whosoever. Okay. Sejin Kimeth says what? Person comes in this hot hell that he, okay, you got another gloss, Adam and Eve, they, heaven, kings, unwordliche. Wordliche is honorably, makes it unhonorably. Wordum and datum, words and deeds, teaching, who, Laura there isn't teaching though. It's the lore, as in if something is forlorn, lost. If you make them lose God's words and deeds, if you make them forget what God has done, when you make them forget what God has said, well, jump from here for a moment to Milton, assuming you know Milton. Who doesn't? Because Satan essentially offers the same thing in Milton. I think it's book 3 in Paradise Lost. Then you got Beelzebub and all the others there. Nobody does it. Only Satan does it. Why in there does Satan do it? Anybody remember? It's been 20 years since I've read Milton.
Like, doesn't he like, well, I mean, he shapeshifts kind of into like another creature, and then Eve kind of gets confused.
Yeah.
She's like, well, you're different.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's how he got in.
Yeah, that's exactly what he does. What I'm asking is, why does Satan go and not somebody else?
Oh, because he doesn't want anyone to have the glory.
He doesn't want anybody else to have the glory, and he doesn't think anybody else can do it. It's more of his overmoda, more of his arrogance, okay? All right, I should have planned something else for today. Don't know why I didn't. Dream of the Rude is not much longer than this. Lost my... I don't remember where it is in here. Dream of the Rude is 228. But Dream of the Rude is a little bit more difficult. It's 156 lines. It's a little more difficult. As you translate Dream of the Rude for next week, I did say next week, right? Dream of the Rude, 27, yes. Think of the structure. I don't mean the structure of the lines. Think of how the poem itself is organized, all right? Because I'm gonna warn you, there's kind of 3 distinct sections, let's say, to it. So as you translate, think about what's going, or when you finish translating, go back and think about how it's ordered and what is going on, what kind of progression is occurring from the beginning of the poem to the end of the poem, okay? That's going to be important because we're going to see something similar in both the Seafarer and the Wanderer, right? Any questions or comments? And literally, I have not...
I wrote it all down. Sorry.
Who is speaking? Lainey was.
I wrote it all down, but yes. I wrote it all down, but do you mind making a note on D2L about the changes in
Yes, I will.
readings?
Yes, I will. I'll do it as soon as we're done. Yep. All right. That's all I have for today. I'm going out of town again. Back out to... Again, lady? Lady?
Sorry, I was just saying thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm going out of town again, so I will have access to email, but I won't be on as much. And I'll reply to, I haven't yet, probably Wednesday or Thursday evening is when I'll look at the articles that you've submitted and reply to any questions that are on the chat. I've not looked at them yet because I've been getting done for this other class and getting ready for going out of town again. Okay. See you next week. Thank you.